seconds and see if more folks join us. And today is election day, so I hope everyone has had an opportunity to fill out your ballots and vote. You can drop ballots off until 8 p.m. tonight, or make sure they're postmarked. So it looks like we're waiting just for one more person to join us. Okay, let's see here. I think just in regards to time, what we'll do is I'll go ahead and bring this meeting to order, and we will skip over the approval of minutes until we meet quorum, and then we'll come back to that item. Does that sound good? Oh, good. We have quorum. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Alicia Topper, and we are going to call our meeting to order. And per the governor's proclamation regarding the Open Public Meetings Act, his proclamation is 20-28. We will only be operating this meeting virtually. If you're a member of the public joining us today, we will have an opportunity at the end of our agenda for you to provide comments. Otherwise, we'll keep the conversation directed just to board members. And with that, let me see if I can find my agenda. We'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Or excuse me, the minutes.
So moved.
So I think that was a motion from Jamie.
I'll second it.
And
Bridget
Bridget with the second. Thank you. All those in favor with a voice call, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, minutes passed. Thank you, everybody. Well, welcome, Peggy. We had some great discussion before our meeting started, but I'll turn the floor over to you for the City of Vancouver update. And if you would share, I know you're reaching retirement too.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, I'm retiring next Friday. So it's an exciting time for the city. We have lots of changes, added a bunch of new staff. It's going to be a great time. I know some of you are aware that Samantha Whitley is coming over here, and it just started yesterday. And we haven't quite decided who from the city is going to be on this at this meeting, but it'll probably be Samantha. We just haven't finished that discussion. But we do have some updates on both the Affordable Housing Fund and on our homeless plan. So last night, a city council approved the funding for 3 different projects. 1, 2, 3, yes, for the Affordable Housing Fund. And it's really the largest allocation so far. Some of the projects received $2 million. One of them is a new project for Community Roots. They're looking for property, and they're going to do another tiny homes project. The Vancouver, the VHA is also going to be doing, they're putting together Laurel Manor. Some of you might have heard of that. It's going to be a senior housing project here in Vancouver. And they're also looking at trying to buy another either hotel or another apartment complex. And we also awarded funds to Habitat for Humanity. They have some property that they purchased from a church, and they're going to be building, I think about 6 houses out there, and nine single family homes that they will sell to folks that are low income. And on our homeless services, so as you know, we have an ordinance that's going to allow supported campsites, and it was passed in December. That ordinance also determined the site selection criteria, and it also talked about what areas where camping will not be allowed. At this point, those are environmental areas within 200 feet of a waterway and within 1,000 feet of a supported campsite. So what that means is that's the areas where they will not be allowed. We haven't selected the areas yet. We do have a contract with the first provider, which was Outsiders Inn, and we have an RFP for the second provider, and we should be evaluating those proposals next week. Again, we don't have any of the locations, but we expect to have the first location in the next couple of weeks, so watch for that. And the supported campsites, we're going to be using small structures instead of tents. So we're moving forward with ordering, it's called pallet shelters. So there'll be little indoor shelters with power and heaters in each unit. We've just hired an additional HEART team member who will be working with the Public Works Department. And Safe Park, you're familiar with that. They have their own phone number now. And I'll send that to Rebecca so she can provide that to everyone. But that'll be the number to call to tell people if they can move out to the Safe Park or not. And that's what we have going on now. Feel free to ask any questions. I know that we have Mayor Pro Tem on the line, and we also have Jamie Spinelli, so they might have some additional information for you all.
Thank you, Peggy. Are there any questions or additional comments from members of the board?
This is Linda. No comments, but it's just so great, you know, to be seeing movement and seeing more housing and the greatest number of dollars going out and what's going out with Jamie's work with finding additional shelters for people. So it's just in a frustrating time, all the news we hear, but it feels good to be making some progress forward. So thank you for your work, Jamie and Peggy.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Peggy. And I'm going to go back. I am remiss in saying that I skipped our introductions and go around. It looks like we also have Rob who joined us. So we'll ask Rebecca, would you be willing to go and we'll do roll call?
Absolutely. Good morning. Counselor Linda Glover.
Present.
Amy Rourke.
Oops, sorry. Am I doing an introduction? Is that what we're doing? Okay. I'm Amy Rourke and I am the community representative in District 1.
Bridget McLeeman.
Yeah, I'm Bridget McLeeman. I'm community representative for, I don't know, District 3 maybe?
District 2.
I'm sorry, I always get mixed up.
Good morning, Jamie Spinelli.
Jamie Spinelli, I'm the low income rep for District 1.
Erin Kameroff.
Erin Kameroff, low income rep, District 2.
Good morning, Lance Carter.
Good morning, I'm Lance Carter and I'm community representative.
Good morning, Megan Mulsoff.
Hey, good morning. This is Megan Mulsoff. I am the low-income representative for Region 2. District 2, excuse me.
Good morning, Melanie Green.
Good morning, I'm Melanie Green and I am community representative for District 3.
Rob Perkins.
Good morning, I'm Rob Perkins. I am the elected official representative from District 3.
We also have our interpreters on the line in case David is able to make it to the meeting this morning, and we have several staff members.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I'm Alicia Topper, elected representative. And I appreciate you all entertaining me going back for introductions. And sorry, I missed those this morning. With that, we'll go ahead and move to our update on our CAAB membership. And again, thank you so much, Peggy, for your update this morning.
So I just wanted to give the board a quick update. I want to apologize. I've been a little behind on getting some information out to the full board. We had 3 board members who the terms were coming up at the end of this year. And so we went through a process back in September asking for applications for those. We received one application in each of the positions from the existing board members. Our review committee looked at their applications and agreed that they would like them to continue on the board. And now we have moved that information to the county manager's office, and that will be going before the county council for approval for their next term. Bridget McClellan with the Community Representative District 2. This will be her third and final term on the board. Karen Kameroff for the Low Income District 2 representative. She will also be serving her third and final term. And David Poland, who is our at-large member, his position is not actually advertised because it's an at-large position, but he was requested to serve another term, and this will be his second term on the board.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any questions from the board? Okay, wonderful. And that letter was signed and it was forwarded to the county council. Have they taken action on those appointments, Rebecca?
No, I haven't seen anything pop up. Sometimes they're really good about letting me know when it's happening. Sometimes they just, it goes on the consent agenda, so it's usually not a contentious situation.
Good. Okay, great. Well, 3 great candidates that put their names forward. Thank you so much for your continued commitment and volunteerism on this board. It's great working with you 3. With that, we'll go ahead and move to discussion regarding our January meeting trainings. And I think, Rebecca, you're going to also lead this off.
Yeah, so, typically we have a pretty good understanding of what we're going to do for our January meeting. We're going to get together, we're going to spend the day together, we're going to have lunch, it'll be a great time. We're going to move forward with a virtual meeting this year as we, are unsure of what is going to be happening with the pandemic. And we have a lot of trainings. This last year, we decided just to do more of a typical meeting, get the annual business out of the way that we, need to do every year. So it was a little bit longer of a meeting. But this time, we really have trainings that we need to go through with you before the request for application application reviews. And so we do need to do a longer meeting. I know Zoom fatigue is a very real thing, so I wanted to bring it to the board to get your suggestions on how we lay out the meeting. So on the slide, you can see that we have kind of 2 blocks of things that we'll be doing. The annual business items include the elections, going through the annual documents, minutes, of course, reviewing and adopting the work plan for next year. And then we usually have Vanessa come in and she gives a department update, and we also go over our strategic plan. We estimate that will be around 3 hours of meeting time to accomplish that portion of the meeting. And then we have about 4 hours of training that we would like to do for the request for application. For those of you that were here 3 years ago when we did this, it's very similar. There'll be some updates to the information that we provide, and it will be a great overview, but it'll be pretty similar to what we did the last time. So we want to talk about best practices. We want to help you understand the different housing types and what makes them effective. We want to go over the request for application questions so that you're prepared to see what would make a good answer and how to score those. And then we want to do a software application training. Some of you participated in the ESG or the most recent homeless crisis response system COVID request for application. So you have a little bit of knowledge of the bonfire software, but we want to make sure that everybody's aware of how to use that system. So I wanted to just have a conversation with you to see how you would like to break that up. If you want to do a full day of trainings, we will make that happen. If you would like to break it up into 2 chunks, one that's a 3-hour, one that's a 4-hour with breaks, we can do that. We can do it 2-hour chunks, and I can make that happen, and we can do it over 3 or 4 days. I just wanted to come to you and let you lead the discussion on how we make the typical January training happen.
Okay, and so we'd love full board participation in this discussion. If you want to I'll open the floor. So if you just want to unmute your mic and just state your name, and then we'll just start discussion. So any thoughts on those proposals?
Hi,
The
this is Melanie
silence is
Green.
deafening.
Oh.
So I'd rather see two separate chunks, the business items and then a separate training chunk. That's just preference. No real reason.
Thank you, Bridget. And I think Melanie, you had some thoughts as well.
Yeah, I agree with Bridget. I think breaking up over 2 days would be preferable for me.
This is Rob. Agreed, 2 days. And if there could be some planning in case the pandemic abates quicker than we fear, it would be nice to meet in person. The Zoom fatigue is all too real. All too real. I'm kind of tired of my chair.
This is Lance. I like the 2-day idea as well.
Good morning. This is Megan. I also agree with the 2-day chunk.
This is Jamie, and I also agree with the 2 days.
This is Karen. I'm okay with the 2-day. I just wasn't sure and wanted to clarify if you're talking about 2 days in a row or 2 different months.
So I would look at doing them pretty close together because we're going to be getting the applications out to you in January, hopefully. The applications are due the 5th. Staff will be doing the review and asking any clarifying questions of the applicants. And then we want to get the applications to you guys for review before we do the presentations. So I would look at doing it, over a 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. And my plan is to send you a doodle poll, and I'll put 4-hour chunks in there, and you guys can tell me what the best ones are, and then I'll take the top 2 and use those as the scheduling for the meeting if we decide to go with the 2 4-hour chunks. Going one would be a little bit shorter.
Okay, thank you.
And Amy, I'm okay with whenever.
Okay, any other comments or discussion? It sounds like we have consensus on breaking out the training into 2 days. And I would like to also have breaks mixed in there. Maybe we'll take 15-minute breaks. It's nice to be able to
Absolutely.
stretch.
With the caveat that if we are having in-person meetings, as somebody said, it would be really nice to have an in-person meeting. So if we can have a contingency plan for if that happens, it would be good.
Yeah, so Rebecca, would our condition be that the governor lifts the state of emergency?
Yes, and we've been following the lead of the county council as far as the meetings, and they've indicated that they will be going virtual through the end of the year. This meeting is the following week, and so trying to get things scheduled ahead of time, making sure that we have that available. So yeah, I mean, and I will obviously keep that in mind and see if there's some place that we can have. Not all of the conference rooms in the county are available for scheduling for large groups yet. So I'll check in to see what we can do there if that's a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Because, as Amy, sorry, because it's not a group of 1,000 or more, what about the vaccination thing? Is that going to be required or what?
That's a very good question, and I don't have an answer to that since I haven't done the research yet.
So if there were other venues available at no charge to this group, say, for example, some meeting facility next to the Furstenberg Center that just got finished constructing, would that be a possibility for in-person in January, considering that particular facility is scheduling its spaces?
Yeah, we don't keep it to county facilities. We have in the last few years only because it's easy access to the conference room at Luke Jensen, and it has a great setup as far as being able to access the H drive, which is what we use for all our documents and things like that. But we have done them in other locations in the past, and we're not specific to using county.
In other words, Evergreen Schools has a delightful community facility now, and its boardroom is large enough for this group.
That's great. Thank you.
So I could inquire.
I will reach out and see what we can, let me get some more information about the vaccination requirements. And then I can reach out to know what the requirements would be about for the size of our group.
Okay. Do we have we don't have a date yet, right?
It's January 4th. So it's the first Tuesday.
Ooh.
At
Okay,
this
any
point,
more
I will move forward with a doodle poll for finding 2 blocks of 4 hours, and then I'll do some research about possibly doing it in person.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. I was going to ask if there were any other comments before we move to our next item. Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and march forward to the 2022 CAAB nomination for executive team.
That's me again. So I just wanted to, every November we, remind the board that we are looking for our executive team for the following year. I can't believe it's already 2022. It does sound really odd to say. So the executive team is open to all board members. You can serve up to 3 years in each position. Our current executive team, we have Chair Treasurer Alicia Topper. She has served 2 years, so she's eligible for 1 more year in that role. Our Vice Chair is David Poland. This is his first year serving in that position. We have Secretary Bridget McClayman, and she has served 1 year in that position. And so that's just to give you an idea of who's on our executive team right now. We can take nominations now or anytime by email or phone call through the next meeting, and then we will do a last call for nominations at the January meeting, and then we will do the vote for the executive team at that time.
Okay, so we have a month to consider and put our names forward. And then I will commit to a better process than last year's. I know moving to remote, it was a little clunky. And so Rebecca, I will look forward to working with you to find a way that we can do anonymous ballots. That way everyone can feel comfortable in their vote. And I see a thumbs up from Bridget, so that's great. Okay. We have another item, and this one actually will be for Jeff DeLuca. We're going to have a presentation from the Washington State Community Action Partnership. Jeff, we're really pleased to have you with us this morning and are looking forward to your presentation.
Hi, Alicia. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to all the members of the board for giving me some time this morning. I will go ahead and start my video here. And I hope you'll excuse me. I do have, I just came back from some travel and I have a little bit of a frog in my throat. So I'm going to try and speak as clearly as I can. But I also have a couple slides. Is it possible for me to share those?
I believe so. Rebecca, can you give him presenter mode?
You should have access to share now.
All right. Now let me see if I can go to the full slideshow here. All right. Well, to start, good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff DeLuca. I am the Executive Director of Washington State Community Action Partnership. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I'm here today to just give you a little bit of information about WASCAP, what we do. Some of you are familiar with us. And then also to give a little bit of a roundup of some of the items that we're looking at as we develop our 2022 state legislative priorities. These are still kind of a moving target at the moment, but we do have a couple of items that we've kind of honed in on and that we're continuing to work on with our various coalition partners that I'm really looking forward to working on in January when the legislature comes back. So what is WASCAP? So we represent and support the 30 community action agencies in Washington State. So Clark County is one of our 4 public agencies, and we also have 26 private nonprofits. We cover all 39 counties, just like Community Action nationally. There's 1,000 agencies nationally, and we're in 99% of America's counties. And for me, the real kind of sweet spot that we have as community action is that we have a very local insight into the experience of poverty and the issues that are front and center at the local level, that we can come together and tell the story of why we need to create change and mobility and opportunity for everyone. We provide training and technical assistance to the local agencies. So various types of case management training, fiscal trainings, equity and social justice trainings. Those are open to everyone in the network, including board members. So that's kind of our first bucket of work that we do, just make sure that the agencies have what they need to get the work done in the communities in terms of skills and knowledge and connection to state and federal resources. And we also engage in statewide advocacy on issues of poverty, equity, and access to services. So here is the map of all of our community action agencies. I've always liked this map just because it really shows you our breadth. Of course, there are some agencies that do provide services over these county lines, and occasionally, names of agencies will change and things like that. But this will give you a sense of kind of what our reach is in the state. And also, I will send these slides to Rebecca at the end of the presentation so that we can make sure that you have these as well. So I always like to ground us in the promise of community action. This is our national community action partnership promise, and the community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. Our aspirations as a network are to be vibrant, united, and inspired. We want equity at the center of our culture and practices. That continuous improvement deepens our impact. So when we assess our work, the goal is to do better and to do more and to do better. And that change, and there's been a lot of change over the last 2 years, up and down funding streams. I'm sure you all are in the loop about what's been going on in Clark County with all the different housing funds, the utility assistance, all of that. Change is an opportunity to shape the future of our communities and our programs. Our values: we believe all people should be treated with dignity and respect regardless of income. We believe that Washington State and our country has the moral obligation and the capacity to ensure that no one is forced to endure the trauma of poverty. We believe healing begins when we accept both individual and collective responsibility for naming and dismantling those structures that reinforce deep, persistent poverty. So we seek to undo those systems of racism, of sexism, ableism, homophobia, and all those forms of oppression that really entrench poverty. And we believe that everyone can reach their potential when we center the voices and expertise of low-income communities in those programs and services that stabilize and equip them to better their lives. And we believe that innovation and inclusive excellence requires multi-sector partnership and collaboration. So we need to be working throughout the community, not just with each other in community action, but with all of our community partners that have a shared interest in dismantling systems of oppression and poverty. In terms of our strategic plan at WASCAP, we've made goal number one our equity focus. We very purposefully put that up as our number one, and that is breaking down the structural barriers from holding people back from realizing their potential. Goal number two, accessible solutions with each community address the 12 dimensions of poverty. The 12 dimensions of poverty is some research that we did about 10 years ago at WASCAP, and I have a slide on the next page that will go into that a little bit surrounding our theory of change. And goal three, the public and stakeholders become driving forces in addressing poverty. So that is making sure that the public obviously is engaged and hearing about what we're doing. And that also ties in with goal four, which is strengthening our networks impact and reach. So this is the theory of change that we worked on. This is the latest iteration of it. I believe this project began long before my time at Community Action. I became the policy manager at WASCAP in the beginning of 2018, and then I was promoted to executive director at the end of 2019. But I believe this project began somewhere in the 2011, 2012 range with our partners at the Prosperity Agenda and with our fellow community action associations in Oregon and Idaho. But when we say that our mission in community action is to stabilize and equip families and individuals to exit poverty for good, this is really what we mean. And so what we mean by that is we believe that the path to getting rid of poverty for good in our communities is ensuring that people's basic needs are met. Because if we don't have that, if you don't have that hierarchy of needs kind of met, that food, warmth, housing, safe and healthy housing, if you don't have, and then, those are the three kind of key basic needs. Then it starts to bleed over where you've got physical and mental health. You got to have access to health care. And then you've got to have the provider that knows how to take care of you, that knows your experience, that can provide culturally relevant and responsive care to whatever needs that you may have around physical and mental health. You've got to have some kind of income. And then there's mobility. Transportation, you've got to be able to either access transit or have your own car. But one in four Washingtonians can't or don't drive. And we know that that's a real barrier right now is transportation. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about that in our legislative priorities too. But we believe basically that once we've got these items mostly taken care of, then we can really move to the next level with equipping people with the tools to exit poverty. And that is educational opportunities, making sure that children are safe and thriving, building assets, stabilizing employment, making sure that there are social networks and that there's community and that people really can see themselves growing and seeing that they have opportunity. And that can't be made real, though, if we haven't moved toward making sure that folks' basic needs are secure. So as far as our healthy individuals and families, how we work with people, that is sort of what our model is. But then there's a flip side to that, which is the community level focus. And that is, how do we build diverse, equitable, inclusive, and healthy, and I would also add sustainable communities? How do we get people to understand their stake in creating these more equitable communities? That this is a factor that really benefits all of us, that we are in community explaining the realities of poverty, but also lifting up the low-income people's voices directly as part of that process, as we do on our boards, on this board, and getting out into the community and with our legislative leaders and local leaders and explaining the realities of poverty. And if we can do that work, then we can make progress on changing attitudes and changing practices, engaging community members to give to community action, to advocate, to volunteer, to build a shared buy-in in community action's model, and the fact that we are a local solution to poverty reduction, that the local focus and the local control, even though we are part of something bigger, you as the boards drive what happens in the communities with community action. And so people in community have control over what happens at the local level. So that's my about WASCAP. Before I jump into the legislative priorities, I'm happy to stop there and take any questions. I think I saw Amy had a hand raised.
Yes, I do.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, I have a question. Is this at all go any work? Do you guys, you know about the 10-year plan that the poverty reduction work group?
Yes, we were involved in that. I helped co-write the section on housing actually.
Right.
Yeah, this definitely dovetails with that.
Okay.
We are very committed to the 10-year blueprint.
Okay.
Yep.
This is Alicia, kind of thinking about the community action and the creation at the federal level and the enabling legislation. Has there been a lot of changes over time on how community action is working locally from the beginning and its inception?
Over the years, yes. So we were founded through the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964. And that was the same part of the same suite of legislation that created AmeriCorps, Head Start, the kind of the beginnings of basically having a national K-12 education system. So in the era of basically Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, creation of Medicare, and then later the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. So we are really a historic legacy of that work. There have been a lot of changes over the years. The biggest one, basically, once we showed up in the community and were starting to build power, basically the federal government started to walk things back a little bit. In 1981, we were converted into a block grant. So that's why we have the Community Services Block Grant now. So that has been in place since 1981. We have the CSBG Act, which governs us. In terms of changes at the federal level, the biggest ones were probably mostly administrative in terms of like the implementation of the organizational standards over the last decade and things like that. Coming up, actually tomorrow morning, there is a hearing in the House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives, on a bill to reauthorize the Community Services Block Grant for 10 years. We have not been reauthorized since 1999, I believe. So what that means is that we basically operate on year-to-year funding. Congress has to fund us year to year. If we were reauthorized, we would not have to basically go through like the year-to-year process. We could get basically 10 years of federal funding commitment. And so there's a big push right now, and Representative Jamie Herrera Butler is really critical to that. I mean, she's also been one of our top supporters on the House side, particularly with the Republican caucus on supporting Community Services Block Grant and community action.
Thank you for that. It helps me thinking of the context and the work that you're doing today. So appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I just had one more. Is there a way that I can get your contact information afterwards? So
absolutely.
I'm one of the members on, one of the 22 members on the poverty reduction work group. And so I wanted to.
Oh, you're on the steering committee?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd love to connect with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right. So moving on to our state legislative priorities. So I mentioned the Community Services Block Grant. So we get about $8.4 million a year from the feds that gets spread across those all 30 agencies, including yours. And that translates to maybe a couple $100,000 per agency, but that money is incredibly flexible, and it really allows us to leverage all the other work that we do as community action. So that item may end up being 2% of a total agency budget, but it leverages up to, for every CSBG dollar, it can leverage up to $50 more in other resources from either public or private entities, the value of volunteer hours, etc. We also have a unusual but very positive partnership with the Washington State Department of Commerce. That's where the money comes from the feds to the state government, is through the Department of Commerce. And you may have had Karen Dunn here at the CAAB board before, or Carl Hoffman or David Hoadley. I'm not sure who you work with directly, but they are the CSBG program managers. And so we also have $1.1 million a year that comes in from the state. We're one of only about a dozen states that adds anything to the community services block grant. So we're going to make a big ask of Governor Inslee and the legislature this coming year. We want to be in Washington the first state to get a full federal match, to get a full state match to the federal CSBG allocation. So we're going to be asking the governor to add $7.3 million for this last year of the biennium to hopefully start that process. Will we get the full 7.3 million? I don't know. I think we can make a really, really strong case for it, especially given the fact that the state revenues are way up. We're looking at about a $5.5 billion surplus in the budget because of the economic recovery, the revenues going back up. Still have a lot of deep-seated problems that need to be dealt with around that. But the legislature is going to have more money to play with than they normally would have in a difficult economic time. And we're going to be advocating for the strongest reinvestment that we can put into our communities as possible. So in the scheme of $5.5 billion, we think 7.3 million is a pretty reasonable ask right now. So we got a letter into the governor, hoping that he'll include it as part of his recommended budget that'll be coming out in December. We've had initial conversations with legislators that have gone well. And we're also looking at this as a platform for raising the profile of the federal reauthorization effort. So that is HR 5129. And there is a hearing in the House tomorrow it's at 7:15 in the morning Pacific time. It's at 10:15 Eastern. But it will be a big moment for our network to finally have a hearing on the reauthorization bill and move it closer to passage in the House of Representatives. And then Patty Murray is a very key person. She chairs the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee in the U.S. Senate, which a lot of the funding for our programs goes through. So to the extent that you have those relationships with her or want to reach out and thank her for her support of community action and urge her to support and move the reauthorization bill, that would be amazing. The other big ticket item that we're looking at.
Jeff, can I interrupt you for a moment?
Go ahead.
On that point, do you have a letter or language you've been sharing with community action boards that they can use as a template to mail to our senators or congresswomen and men?
Yes, we're working on that this and next week. We will have templates going out.
Okay.
Do you have the bill number by any chance?
Yes, it is 5129. Let me make sure that because they change those things change every 2 years. So, and it's the Community Services Block Grant Reauthorization Act of 2021.
You said that's 50. What is it again? 5029?
5129.
Oh, 5029. Thank you.
Yep. And then on weatherization, that's another program that's very much associated with community action. So in the last legislative session earlier in 2021, the legislature actually cut the program. Normally we would get about $15 million in biennial funding. We only got $5 million. There were a couple of reasons for that. Mostly we think that there was a misunderstanding about how much money was going to be left unspent because of COVID. And by the time that those numbers were updated, the legislature was already pretty much ready to be done with the budget. So Commerce has made it their number 2 priority to get that funding restored. This is important for a couple of reasons. The federal money for weatherization has become less flexible For example, LIHEAP isn't paying for the plus health measures anymore. So being able to go in and not just, air seal and insulate, but also, rip up old carpet and put down vinyl flooring that won't aggravate your asthma or COPD, doing other kinds of pilots, fuel, switching appliances to be more energy efficient, that kind of stuff. We really need that state funding that gets matched with utility funding as well, to really make sure that we have a modern program that meets our health, housing, and environmental justice goals. And so the governor is very supportive of the weatherization program. He actually wanted $50 million for weatherization in the last, in his proposed budget last time, but we're still working on things with the legislature on that. And the other piece of this that's really important is a lot of federal uncertainty with infrastructure and the reconciliation bill that's being discussed. There's some money for weatherization in there as well. So we're waiting to see, and fingers crossed, that that's a really robust investment. And then finally, our other item that we are keeping very close track of is advancing the Medicaid transformation demonstration that's been going on for the past 5 years. And this includes the work with the Accountable Communities of Health and the Foundational Community Supports Program. So those pathways pilots that have been working really well in some communities. I know they've been working better in some than others, but we think that because community action in some other parts of the state have really been making a lot of progress braiding pathways and FCS for supportive housing and employment, that we can really show our edge as community action in promoting that program. So we're very invested in making sure that we continue to have the resources to develop and deliver that program. Any questions on those items?
This is Rebecca. I just wanted to mention to the board that we have been informed that we should be receiving a link to the hearing later this afternoon. And as soon as I receive that, I will forward it onto the board so you can watch the federal reauthorization effort tomorrow morning if you're up bright and early at 7:15.
Yeah, and Rebecca, I can forward it to you as soon as I get off the call because I got it just as I was logging on.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, and then I have our this is my last slide here. So in addition to the items that community action has to take the lead on because they're our programs like community services, block grant, and weatherization, and our sweet spot with the Medicaid transformation waiver program. We are working in coalition with many organizations that you are part of. The Poverty Reduction Work Group, the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. I'm on the Public Policy Committee for the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. There is still going to be a lot of momentum for investments in affordable housing. The reconciliation bill that Congress is debating right now, the final negotiated version does have about $150 million, $150 billion for housing nationwide. That will vastly expand rental vouchers, repair public housing that has been in disrepair for decades, and also put a lot, it'll probably end up being somewhere in the realm of about another 200 to 400 million for housing trust fund projects out of the federal in Washington state. But there's also a big appetite in the legislature to continue the momentum that has been made in the legislature on housing. What exactly those priorities are going to be, the Public Policy Committee is still kind of working through those. We hope to have the Housing Alliance's support on our weatherization ask. I'm sure there will be more asks for the Housing Trust Fund. The other big piece that I think would be of interest to this group, DSHS, the Department of Social and Health Services, has a decision package. So the decision package is basically what the agencies propose to the governor to do. So will the governor accept this proposal? That's, we won't know until he releases his budget. But the agencies, the Social and Health Services, Commerce, et cetera, they do share these proposals with the community. And sometimes even if it doesn't make it into the governor's budget, community members can take up the ask and lead it with the legislature. So for the Age Blind Disabled program, we are looking at a massive cash increase to that grant. There was a bill that passed last session to modernize the standard of need to kind of bring balance to what those cash grants for, TANF, TANF, ABD, programs like that, to bring them up to something more reasonable. So $197 a month is the current ABD cash grant. It's going to be up if this decision package goes forward to about $400 a month, which is still not enough, but it is more than the grant has ever been, and it is going to be a relatively for the state. It's only going to cost the state about $35 million to do that. So between the cash grant increases, the money going into affordable housing, but there's also going to be a lot of discussion this session around what combination of policies to increase the supply of affordable housing. So that is zoning reform, making it legal to develop affordable housing in more areas, making sure that there is rent stabilization, that there's not these massive rent increases that we're seeing in the community right now. But it's got to be a both and approach. If we're going to have more supply, we can't just have that supply going to the market rate development that people cannot afford. We need to make sure that we have affordable housing. We need to make sure that we have supply for the lower income communities, and that we have those tenant protections and rent stabilization, so that we don't constantly go through this boom and bust cycle of evictions and homelessness.
This is Amy. I'm just wondering, why aren't we working on putting a cap on rent at all? I'm just wondering that because I've been asking that for years.
Yeah, I mean, that would be that would be pretty radical. And I think that it's a point well taken. Like when you see these $500 rent increases that people are getting, especially after landlords were just provided like $1 billion from the state to help people catch up on their rent. It just it doesn't make sense. And so I think you're going to see in the legislature this session a lot of attention on to rent increases. California and Oregon have statutory limits on one-time rent increases. Washington State currently does not. So that I'm sure that will be a conversation that the Housing Alliance provides leadership on, and we will be working with them through that.
Also on the DSHS stuff you were talking about there, do you work with poverty reduction or poverty action, right?
Yep.
Poverty Action Network. Okay, I was just wondering. Yep. So that's stuff would go through them. So, okay.
So another interesting feature about poverty action. Poverty Action is at Solid Ground, which is also a community action agency. So we work very closely with Poverty Action in the legislature, particularly because they show such great leadership and they do great research on those basic needs programs.
Yeah, I've been on that the Poverty Reduction Work Group Committee for 3 years, and when I first got on there, I realized that Clark County was totally forgot about. Just over the last, since the pandemic, we're actually being recognized that we're down here, you know, because basically they think we're like PDX. I mean, we get their news more than we get ours, it seems like. So
Yeah, no, that's great that we're really able to have a statewide reach with that group. See, Rob has a hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering if the scope of your work includes advocacy for closing all those. I sit on a school board, so this issue of internet access at home for kids who go to our schools has been pretty hot, as you know. We're using it right now to have our meeting, right?
Right.
Whether or not that's in your scope of work, and if so, are you aware of the drafts for something called the Digital Equity Act? And where would you be involved with such an effort?
We do support the
state level.
Digital Equity Act.
Beg pardon?
We do support the Digital Equity Act. We have not, you know, that's an item that we sign in and support on, and we sort of, you know, we follow the lead of the community organizations. I think there's like the National Digital Inclusion Association and other folks who work on and provide leadership on those digital equity issues. We are very, very happy to support that legislation, and we know it's a big issue throughout our network. Even just, for example, our rural agencies that had to pivot to folks providing services remotely. It's been a tremendous challenge. So digital equity and inclusion is definitely on our priorities lists.
Section 406 of that proposal proposes a digital equity forum. Do you see community action groups throughout the state as a part of the voice in a forum like that?
Absolutely, particularly as navigators. There's actually a provision in the federal CSBG Reauthorization Act that creates a community action specific digital navigator program.
Okay. Well, if it helps, Washington School Directors Association is analyzing that bill right now for support, and I think we have legislative positions aligned with yours.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to be in touch about that.
All right, I'll mention you to our advocates on that sense, but yeah, it just made sense.
Great. And so other items that we're just going to be kind of continuing to track, equity and social justice issues. Columbia Legal Services has a bill that they're looking at. I believe it's House Bill 1412. It was introduced by Representative Tara Simmons, who is the first formerly incarcerated legislator in Washington State. So she has a lot of experience with the criminal legal system and the inequities imbued in that. So there is a bill that she is working on that has some continued momentum around reducing or relieving legal financial obligations for folks who cannot pay. So making sure that those fines and fees don't prevent somebody from being able to get a driver's license, turn their lives around and start applying for jobs and all that kind of stuff. There will be some conversation, I think, around clarifying some of the police accountability legislation from last session. We want to make sure that we preserve that new accountability that exists, make sure that the resources are there to implement that fully, and make sure that we don't lose momentum while addressing those issues. And then we'll see if there's continued momentum around revenue reform. The Washington State has the most regressive tax system in the country, and state tax system in the country. We have the low income 20% of the population pays about 6 times the percentage of their income in taxes as the top 20%. So we need to continue working to kind of reverse that trend, bring some at least some balance to that. But also, given that there is a $5.5 billion state surplus, we will see if they really want to continue moving on creating or moving forward on any new taxes, especially since it's going into an election year in 2022. So those are that's just kind of a sneak peek of what we're looking at. This could evolve and change a little bit as we get closer to session, but this is what's front and center on our mind right now, and we welcome your participation, your continued engagement with us as we move forward. So I really appreciate having the time to meet you all and speak with you all today.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any final questions from the board?
It looks like David has his hand raised.
My voice okay?
You sound good, David.
Okay. I was curious what your organization may be doing related to people on SSI, because I know a lot of people that are deaf, blind, and they get about under $800 a month, and then they get food stamps about $90 a month. And so we have a problem with, they have to either move someplace like Rochester or Longview where there's not as many deaf people to socialize with, there's no public transportation, less job opportunities because they can afford rent there, or they have to not be on the lease and have 2 or 3 families all huddled up, and they are not qualified under Deaf House Hopper right now with a high definition of homeless to get housing first help. So we have a crisis with that. So, and you can't save more than $2,000 in the bank either. So you can't save up for a rainy day. So that's one thing I wanted to know. Can you tell me that?
Sure. Are you aware of the effort at the federal level with the SSI Restoration Act that's just been introduced?
No, but I'd like more information about that.
I'd be happy to follow up with you on that. We do have a couple of Washington state legislators who have already signed on to that. That would basically bring SSI benefits up to the poverty line, deal with that asset limit issue. I'm not sure if it touches on the housing piece. I haven't seen that kind of line item. But I think there's been this, the efforts around rental assistance at the state level and this expanded voucher access in the reconciliation bill that's coming forward is going to be really, really critical to making sure that people who are deaf or blind or hard of hearing can access housing in their communities with their social circles and really try to end the displacement that people with disabilities experience.
Thank you. Yeah, if you can email me the information. I have contacts because I interned in Congress with the 2 co-chairs for the Congressional Deaf Caucus, so I can read it and I can email them and encourage them to also sponsor it.
Great.
Thank you for that question, David. Any other final thoughts, questions? Okay, Jeff, thank you so much.
I
Time.
have one.
Oh, go ahead, Rob. Yeah.
And that's just, I don't remember how often I bring this up in meetings like this, but there exists at the federal level at least 2 definitions for homelessness and a couple 3 for poverty levels. And the last time that I had a conversation with Congresswoman Herrera Butler was to kind of ask for one definition, the broader definition for homelessness that includes the couch crashing under that we have to count in school districts under the McKinney-Vento laws. What kind of advocacy, if any, are you guys doing about kind of unifying the definition so that every agency in local government can use one definition?
I'm interested in learning more about that. We have not done anything specifically around that yet. There are a couple of bills I'm aware of that would standardize the definition of poverty. One of them is from a new congressman from New York, Mondaire Jones, has a bill, and I believe AOC is on it too. I think it's the two of them that are trying to standardize, but also modernize the definition of poverty. As far as homelessness and changes to those definitions, I'm not sure.
The McKinney-Vento Act requires schools to count and supply benefits to students who are couch crashing, which I've been told is also, I think David alluded to it, is a condition for deaf, hard of hearing people of all ages, is that they have to, bundle up in order to afford the rent, and it gets crowded. But including that couch crashing, I don't have a home, but I'm staying at my cousin's on the floor kind of circumstance, and the definition of homelessness would unify, I guess, the school districts and the other agencies like them with the rest of the federal and state definitions for these things, and could help us, understand the condition better. That's sort of the thing I'm getting at, is that if we're speaking the same dialect, I think we'll get further.
I have a question for you, Rob, actually. So what is the school's definition? If they're like on a couch, that's not homeless, or is it like the couch?
No, if they're staying, if their family doesn't have a home and they're staying with another family, that's couch crashing.
Okay.
That's not the statutory language. That's just that if you think of like Evergreen Public Schools, maybe Melanie can chime in if I get the numbers wrong.
Well, I counted close to like almost like 1,400 that were, and I don't know if OSPI had updated its website from, this was just last month I looked, but there was 1,400 students in Clark County that were homeless just in Clark County.
Yeah, Evergreen's numbers split up to be, this large population of children who don't have their own homes, but have shelter in someone else's home. And then a small double digit percentage of students who are in cars or shelters or tents or nothing.
Oregon has this really cool thing. Actually, I don't know if you knew about this, or Portland, that the kids, actually there's a bus that goes out and picks these kids up, even if they're at tents, and takes them to this one little school over there on Killingsworth.
Yeah, that's a requirement for every school district in the nation. If they have an enrollment and enter housing instability, they get to stay in their school, and the districts must transport them.
That's the way the McKinney veto. No, I'm talking about like this is just a school for kids that are homeless on Killingsworth. I mean, like this bus will go out and pick them up at their tents during the day, and not the McKinney veto. I've done that, but I meant it's it's weird. I don't know. Maybe I was gonna look more into it.
This might be a good topic as an agenda item to discuss a little bit more about homelessness and impacts with K-12 education. All very good questions and discussion. And Jeff, I know that you had quite a few takeaways and questions from this meeting. I'm sure Rebecca will be able to have a detailed list of those items if you weren't able to capture them all. But we have a very engaged, interested board. But we are just about to our agenda item for our finance report. So if there isn't any other items in regards to Jeff's presentation, we'll move on.
I just wanted to say thank you. And as a sort of reminder, I think we should have this update at least once a year, because it really put the session in context. So thank you, Jeff, and reminder for future agenda item.
Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
I appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. That was an incredible discussion. We do have a July 2020 to June 2021 finance report. I know Alyssa and Rhonda are with us this morning. This is an important report since we all take interest in grants and how our partner collaborative agencies are doing with the funds that they've been entrusted with. So with that, we'll go ahead and ask Rhonda and Alyssa and it looks like maybe Willie provide us an update.
Good morning, everyone. This is Alyssa Page, and I think I am up first. I was waiting for Rebecca to do her normal introductions. Oh, this is
I think I'm up
Rhonda.
first,
Yep,
actually, Alyssa.
you are.
Yeah. Good morning. I'm Rhonda Hills, Senior Financial Analyst here at DCS, and I work with the Community Action Programs in Rebecca. And this is our Community Action Program report. We had 6 provider programs that we paid for during the fiscal year ending June 30, 2021. As you can see, we funded 211 Info, Clark College Financial Wellness, Clark County Food Bank, Fresh Alliance Program, the Clark County Volunteer Lawyers Program, Access to Justice, Partners in Careers Career Academy, and Share Hunger Response. You can see the annual contract amount. I will point out that there was a little carryover for the Clark College and for Partners in Careers on their programs from the previous fiscal year. We did allow people to carry over some of their funds within the first 2 years of their contract. So, and this is how they came out with their spending. 100% for 3 of them, or 4 of them, 98.3 for another. That's really good. And then Clark College, they took a little while to get rolling in their first year and had a lot of ground to make up. Their contract was originally $100,000 per year. So, you know, they had a much better second half than they did their first half. So, any questions, anyone? Okay, I think Alyssa is up next.
Hi again, everyone. And kind of the same layout for the homeless crisis response system. We have the total amount across the top, and this would be from July of 2020 to June of 2021. These were also 2-year contracts, and we also allowed some carryover on either grant funding that was a 2-year budget or some unspent local funds. The agencies and programs are listed down the left-hand side, and then the funding sources are across the top. So CHG is our Consolidated Homeless Grant, and that comes from Commerce, along with HEN, which is Housing and Essential Needs. And then the House bill spent to date, that would include all 3 of our House bills, 1359, 2060, and 2163. Total percent spent to date. The majority of these are close to 90% spending. We like to see some a little bit lower due to additional funding that we received, COVID funding, and our requirements were to spend out some of the other funding first before spending our local funds. And okay, next page is continued on. We had some more contracts here. So this is the prevention rent assistance and permanent supportive housing. Agencies down the left side, funding sources across the top, similar to the last slide that we had. The other spent to date is what looks a little bit different, and other could be COVID funds, other agencies like public health FEMA funds, or general fund dollars. One of our grants changed mid-grant to not allow any allocated expenses. So we did need a little bit of additional support covering our providers' admin costs. And then total spent to date, and it's the same concept with these as well as far as percent of spending. They did get additional COVID state or federal funds that did have a requirement to be spent first. Is there any questions on either of those? And I think this is the last one, and this is our rapid rehousing and transitional housing. Funding sources and total spent to date with grant and local funds, and other would be the same concept as before, which would be COVID or an outside funding source. Oh, there's more and more and more. So this is shelter services. Lots of money you guys can see going out for the shelter services. motel vouchers, shelters, emergency shelters, women's shelters, domestic violence shelters. The annual contract amounts are state grants, local funds, and other funds, then percent spent to date. So lots of money going out into the shelters. And this last one is a newer-ish grant, the Shelter Capacity Grant. And this started in March of this year. The funds were set up for Bertha's Place Shelter, and what I've heard is they're having a little bit of issues getting some permits and construction with everything that's going on with COVID and COVID related activities. So they should be up and running. I heard actually this month coming up, and I think, yeah, this month coming up for Bertha's Place Shelter.
Alyssa, this is Michael, just because I have that information. So the grant went into effect in March. The shelter itself has not opened yet. The facility used to be the Howard Johnson's. It's right by the mall. It's a 62-room non-congregate shelter. We were hoping to open it a couple months ago. The Vancouver Housing Authority has been engaged in doing rehab to make it physically ready to open and operate as a shelter. Things like changes to the rooms, emergency exits, cameras, making sure the fire system works. All the basic rehab stuff. The delays have all been involved to that rehab, specifically supply issues. First, getting a subcontractor for the size of the contract. VHA had a challenge doing that. And then just supply chain issues. Like right now, for example, they're waiting on some doors that are expected to be delivered like in the next month or two. We have just received the interim certificate of occupancy from the City of Vancouver for Bertha's Place. There's still work that's going to be happening through between now and December. The interim certificate of occupancy means that Catholic Community Services staff can now go in the building and begin training. Only staff, so they're and they're limited to the first floor because there's some work continuing on the second floor. So the final certificate of occupancy is expected in the second half of December, after which they will be able to start receiving people in Bertha's Place. So that's the status where we are at and why there.
And we do have until 2023 to spend the shelter funds, and we do plan on spending 100% of them. So even though we got started a little bit late, there are still plans to spend out the funds completely.
Is any of, this is a weird question, but is that money going to fix the the driveway pulling in there? Because it is like the worst. Or does that, because there's the other motels that are there. I wonder who's, you guys pulled in there, right?
I
mean,
don't
it's
know.
like horrible.
Yeah, I don't know if any of the funds are going to be used to cover the property, Michael or Rebecca. Do either of you know that?
Yeah, these funds are all for operations, program operations of the actual shelter. The VHA rehab, I do not know to what extent they've worked on the driveway. I do know that it has been involved in leveling some parts of the driveway and landscape around it, but I don't know the details of that rehab work. But VHA, which has that scope, they're doing everything that they are required to do to bring it to code and meet they're using state and federal funds, which come with pretty strict requirements in terms of making things code and ADA accessible, things like that.
Is there a waiting list right now for it, or is it just first come, first serve when it opens?
So this, like every publicly funded shelter by the county, access is going to be through coordinated entry, and that access to that is based on a vulnerability assessment.
And this is Beth. I'll just add there, Amy, that Council for the Homeless and coordinated entry staff have been working with our homeless outreach staff. So every homeless outreach provider, regardless of their funding source, has been engaged in conversations around how that coordinated entry process will look like and how to make contact with people that are currently outside. So there's already work underway to identify the most vulnerable unsheltered persons that are going to be interested in going to Bertha's Place once open.
Thank you.
This is Rebecca. We have a new finance person on our team to help us with all of the COVID funds. So I want to introduce Willie. He's going to go over the next several programs and give you an idea of what we've been doing with our COVID funding.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. My name is Willie Traub. I'm a new analyst with the Department of Community Services. I've been with the county for 9 years, but I've only been with DCS since August, so please forgive me. I'm still learning a lot, and there is a lot to learn. So we'll go through this together. It'll be fun. Okay, so our first slide here, which it's slightly out of a different order, is covering the Eviction Rent Assistant Program funds. So this is a 2-pager, and it describes the activity under the program. You'll want to note that the time period that's reported for this particular program is slightly wider than the time periods that have been reported for the other programs. And that's really just to give you a complete picture for this entire program since it ended on June 30th of this year. And so this first table here describes the spending under the rent assistance providers for this program. And as you can see, since the program has wrapped up, all of the spending to date has been 100%. Similar with the outreach and engagement providers. On the next table, where our spend other contract funds to wrap up the service. And to the next page. Hopefully it lines up with what I've got. Okay, I need to skip back up. There we go. Okay. Here we've got spending under the CARES Act bundle of funds under COVID-19. And this is for, oh no, this one specifically. We wanted to point out the Clark County Food Bank Fresh Alliance. As you can see right now, they're sitting at 0% spent, but they began spending under this contract in August. So they're moving along under this particular program. Okay. Next one.
Why is the volunteer lawyer so low?
Oh, back there.
Hey, Willie,
defer.
I can jump
Yeah.
in. I'll jump in. This is
Go ahead,
Rhonda.
yes.
I just passed this along to Willie in September, so he's just getting up to speed. This is CSBG CARES Act money, and if you look at the top, the contract duration is from January of 20, which I don't even think we got this grant until May, but they let us backdate, and it goes through September 30 of 2022. So this is just a period of time. This is from July of 2020 to June 30 of 2021, and some of these folks are busy spending some of their other funding sources that had contracts ending previous to this. So many of these programs are also funded with the regular CSBG funds, and they had a tight timeline that was a little tighter, and they were spending those monies first. So I feel like they're on track. Again, we have till September 30 of next year to be spent. 211 blew through their money, but you can probably imagine, I mean, they're fielding so many phone calls, during this COVID-19 time, and share hunger response. I mean, we all know the food scarcity. So anyway, I don't think we should have any concerns about these programs moving forward, but the food bank got oodles of money, and I have every confidence that they will spend that money in time.
So did I see under the Clark College line, was Clark College Financial Wellness Program on one of the slides a couple of slides ago?
Yes. It was, Bridget. Yes, that was
So,
the CSBG, the regular CSBG funds. These are the CSBG CARES Act funds. Rebecca, were you trying to talk? Sorry.
So it's a combined total is what they got. It covers slightly different time periods, but it's the same program.
Yes, Bridget.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Are there additional slides? Oh, good. I just wanted to take note of time. It's 9:26 and our meeting is supposed to end at 9:30. But of course, at the pleasure of the board, if we want to run long to get through the rest of our agenda, that is at the pleasure of the board. So we'll let Willie continue getting through these slides and we'll kind of take a time check.
Okay, I'll move along. Okay, so the next two tables cover different initiatives under the Emergency Solutions Grant from the CARES Act. And this funding source itself has found itself in a lower area of spending priority. As you can see, like there's a lot of these repeat providers, and they've been focused on spending out available funds that are set to expire sooner rather than later. So we're seeing a lot of providers ramping up on this funding source now, but they were focused on spending out funding sources that were set to expire earlier first. Okay, one notable item on this particular table is the Catholic Charities Bertha's Place line. You can see right now it's sitting at 0% for the fiscal year that ended in June 30, and Michael and Alyssa already talked about the situation over there. And then on the second table, this just reports on initiatives under the Emergency Solutions Grant with contracts that are set to start on July 1st of 2021. And so that's why they don't currently show any spent amounts, is because our window of reporting ended on June 30th. And so there wasn't any spending because the contracts weren't set to start yet, but this gives you a perspective of what's been planned so far under the different initiatives reported here. Okay. And then the next three tables describe the amounts that are spent both under the TARA and TRAP funding sources. Both of these funding sources are federal funds that have flowed to the state, and the Department of Commerce is acting as the sponsor. TARA stands for the Treasury Emergency Rent Assistance Program, and TRAP is the Treasury Rent Assistance Program. And the dollars for each of these funding sources do need to be tracked and reported separately, which is why we have two different names for them. But the report that they cover similar initiatives, so they're being reported here together just for ease of reporting to you guys. So I don't think I have any specific notes to talk about for these particular tables, unless someone has some questions. So the final slide is just, or at least for my portion of the presentation, is just a visual illustration of the funds that have been expended by intervention in the time period that we've been talking about, which is the July 1, 2020 to the June 30th, 2021. So a really great illustration of the amount of dollars that are flowing into our community, which is really exciting. And with that, I'll pass over to Rebecca.
So I know all of you have been hearing a lot about rent assistance services and getting those out the door. And so the last three slides that Willie was talking about, the Treasury rent assistance programs, we just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the outcomes, because I know we don't directly report this information to you on a regular basis. Since August of 2020, we have had 3 tranches of funding coming in for eviction rent assistance. The first version was Eviction Rent Assistance Program, ERAP. You saw those slides earlier. The outcomes for that is we served 2,217 households with over 8,700 months of utility and rent assistance for nearly $10 million in that program alone. The second is the Treasury Emergency Rent Assistance. So that's the TRA and TRAP. And to date, which started in the very end of March, we've served 2,419 households with over 22,000 months of rented utility assistance for nearly $20 million in rent assistance. And then I just wanted to show you what that looks like combined. So since August of last year, we've served almost 3,800 in unduplicated households with over 31,000 months of rent and utility assistance, and over $29 million in assistance has gone out into the community, which is an extraordinary amount of funding to be managing and getting out into the community. So we just wanted to kind of give you that quick update on what is happening for those programs.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And members of the board, I know we're just a tad over our schedule, but this is an incredibly important component of our work as a board. So if there are any questions regarding the financial information you just heard from either Willie, Alyssa, or Rhonda, we'll entertain just a minute or two for additional questions or follow-up.
So Rebecca, are you sending out this PowerPoint, or did I get it and miss it?
No, as usual, I'll send up a follow-up email to the board with notes for all kinds of things, and it will include the PowerPoint, so you'll have that in your hands.
It's a great report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. With that, we'll go ahead and move to the next item. If there are any members of the public joining us today who would like to make a comment, we do have a public forum, and now is the time. Are there any members of the public who wish to share anything with the board? If there are any members of the public, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public forum. Other business, we'll have a survey coming about new meeting times for our 2022, as well as our next meeting, which we discussed earlier on January 4th. We'll be getting a doodle poll to find out the best times to meet for our 2-day retreat. And then lastly, before I turn it back over to Rebecca for final comments, I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Linda Glover for her service on the CAAB. With the election tonight, there will be a predecessor who will be filling her shoes as she retires from the Vancouver City Council. So Linda, I just want to thank you for your public service and all the great work that you've done on behalf of all of the citizens of the city.
Thank you, Alicia. That's very nice. As you know, having done it, it's a great experience, and I've been thrilled to be able to be part of all of it. So thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yay.
You have the wrong date on there on save the date. This is January 4th, 2021. Should be a
Okay.
2. Sorry.
Good catch, Amy.
There's always got to be something, right?
It always takes me at least a month to get the year adjusted. Okay, well, Rebecca, any last comments, anything we missed before we adjourn?
I don't believe so. Thank you very much. We appreciate all the work that you guys do on the board. Another very successful year, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the new year, and look forward to several emails coming from me.
Great. Thank you all for the robust and great discussion. It's such a pleasure to serve with each of you, and I look forward to seeing you in January. Meeting adjourned.
See you
Thank you so
next
much.
year.
Bye-bye.